do that to him, she said. And we didn't. We stayed. It was he who walked out of the house in Malibu on that particular morning, slammed the kitchen door, and shot 0 to 60 onto the PCH in my Corvette. Must you always have the last word? For once in your life, just let it go. Why was I the one that had to let it go? Clearly I'm not on top of the self-pity question. Am I failing to understand this as something that happened to him? Am I still understanding it as something that happened to me? Oh, the chronology. On Saturday, March 25th, 2 days after we put John's ashes in the vault at St. John the Divine, Quintana and Jerry flew to California to spend a few days in Malibu. I encouraged this. I even pressed it. And when she wondered if she was well enough, I spoke of how restorative it would be to walk on the beach. I wanted to see Malibu color on her face and hair again. And I had another reason. I wanted her to be a child again. I talked to her before she left, and she sounded anxious, the way she always did before her trip. Do you think I'll be okay in California? She asked. Yes, definitely she would be okay in California. In January, I watched ice floes on the East River from a window at Cornell. In February, I watched ice floes on the Hudson from a window at Columbia. And now in March, the ice was gone, and Quintana would come back from Malibu, restored. That afternoon, I already imagined her walking on the beach. They would have picked up their car and driven up the Pacific Coast Highway. And there would be wild mustard on the hills. And she could take Jerry to see the orchids at Zuma Canyon. And she could take him to eat fish at the Ventura County line. And she could show him where she learned from the Zuma lifeguards how to swim out of a riptide. Oh, and on the desk in my office, I have a photo taken of her when she was 7 or 8, her hair white from the sun. And stuck in the frame, there's a crayoned note she left me one day in Malibu on the kitchen counter. Dear Mom, when you opened the door, it was me who ran away. XXXXXXQ. At 10 minutes past 7 that evening, Tony called and said he was on his way over. I noted the time because I was due for dinner at 7:30, but his urgency was such I did not say so. His wife had been ill, and as he was about to hang up, I asked if Rosemary was back in the hospital. He said it was not Rosemary. It was Quintana. They had gotten off the plane and picked up their bags, and Jerry was carrying their bags to the shuttle crossing in front of her. He looked back. She was lying on her back on the asphalt. Life changes in the instant, the ordinary instant. Midline shift, brain pushed to left side, massive arterial bleed, blood everywhere, like a geyser. Those were some of the things the neurosurgeon said when I got to LA. I walked into the ICU and she was in a coma. And the neurosurgeon said that the coma could continue for days or weeks, and that the bleed into the brain could have been caused by the fall, or the fall could have been caused by the bleed. And new problems could present themselves in the immediate days ahead. Half her skull was stapled, the staples still losing blood. You're safe. I'm here. Have you noticed The way people always describe the ordinary nature of the circumstances in which the disaster occurred. The clear blue sky from which the plane fell. The way the children were playing as usual on the swings when the rattlesnake struck. John and I were married on January 30th, 1964, at the Catholic Mission of San Juan Bautista in California. John wore a navy blue suit from Chip, and I wore a short white silk dress I bought at Ramsar House in San Francisco the day John Kennedy was shot. My plan was to have no entrance, no procession, just stand up there and do it. It never occurred to me to take off my dark glasses. And after the ceremony, we drove to the lodge at Pebble Beach and savored our sunset. I thought about our wedding on the day of Quintana's wedding. She wore a long dress and a veil and expensive shoes, but her hair was in a thick braid down her back as it had been when she was a child in Malibu. We sat in the choir at St. John the Divine. There were small girls with leis barefoot. There were watercress sandwiches, champagne, lemonade, and peacocks on the lawn. And afterwards she kicked off the shoes and unpinned her veil. And when she called that evening, she said, "Wasn't that just about perfect?" July 26, 2003. All gone. Over. In another world. I cannot think of what's gone. If I think of what's gone, the difference between then and now will take me, and I won't be there when she needs me. When do you have to leave? She asked at UCLA the day she could finally speak. I promised that I would not leave until we could leave together. And it occurred to me that that had been my basic promise to her since the day she was born. I would not leave. Oh, the neurologist that asked her what day it is also asked her what city it is. One day she gets it, but not the next. I report this limited advance to a friend when he calls. There's a silence. He asks for the prognosis. I notice his discomfort when I have none to offer. But that doesn't matter to me. See, if I can keep her alive, then John will come back. He and I will go to Paris again. And she and Jerry will have Thanksgiving again. Well, I am keeping her alive. And to keep her alive, I need to focus. I need to avoid anything that might lead me back into the past. Going back has tricked currents, unrevealed eddies. You'd be skimming along in what looks like clear water and suddenly go under. Get sucked down, get caught in the vortex and let go of her hand. Lose control, lose her, feel the water take her. I first identified this vortex effect when I was watching ice flows from the window at Beth Israel. It reminded me of a woman I used to know working at Vogue. She would move through the Condé Nast offices trailing clouds of cigarette smoke, Chanel No. 5, and imminent disaster. But it seems a safe line of thinking. Clear sailing. I move on. I should see it coming, but I don't. I used a version of this character and play it as it lays. And because there was a snake on the jacket of the book, Quintana called it Mommy's Snake Book. I recognized too late that I had entered marked water with Mommy's Snake Book. Quintana was 3 when I was writing that book. I am in The Vortex. Did she ever read Play It As It Lays? Did she ever read anything we wrote? I don't mean dutifully turning the pages and saying, very good, really interesting. I mean actually read it. John asked her that question once. I never would have. And she said, when you read something, you make a judgment on it. And you don't want to make a judgment on your mother and father. Very good, huh? Really interesting. Were we always so afraid of each other? What were we afraid of? Does she know I still see her as a child? I finished the novel and I am now under contract to write a column for Life magazine. We take cue to Honolulu. Life's idea for my first column is that I should write and tell the readers who I am. I plan to do this from Honolulu, but once we arrive, the My Lai massacre breaks. Well, it seems clear that I should forget telling the readers who I am and that I should go to Saigon instead and cover My Lai. I call my editor. He instructs me to stay in Honolulu and tell the readers who I am. That as far as Saigon goes, some of the guys are going out. I warned you, John said. I told you what it would be like working for Life. Didn't I tell you it would be like being nibbled to death by ducks? I actually feel betrayed, humiliated. I should have listened to John. You see where that particular vortex sucked me? From Beth Israel to Quintana 3 to I should have listened to John. I need more than a night of memories inside. See, I need him back. I need him to hold on to her in the water. I sense immediately that being back in Los Angeles has the potential for triggering this vortex effect, and that it can only be controlled by avoiding any place I might associate with either John or Quintana. Well, this requires ingenuity. She was born here. John and I spent most of our married life here. And even after we moved to New York, we spent weeks at a time here. And usually in the very hotel in which I am now staying, the Beverly Wilshire. For some unknown reason, the Beverly Wilshire itself only rarely triggers this vortex effect. So, outside the Beverly Wilshire, I plot my routes, I remain on guard. And never once in 5 weeks do I drive off the Pacific Coast Highway. And when Jean Moore invites me to a house in Malibu, I invent reasons why I have to stay at the Beverly Wilshire. You see, not driving to Malibu means that John can still be wrapping Quintana in towels on the deck outside his office. And not driving to Malibu means her hair can still be bleached from the sun and green from the chlorine in swimming pools. I even avoid driving to UCLA on Sunset. Sunset is how we drove to Malibu. So every morning when I drive to UCLA on Wilshire, I notice the same banners on the light standards. UCLA Medical Center, #1 in the West, #3 in the nation. Every morning I wonder whose ranking this is. I never ask. I seem to be outmaneuvering the vortex.